we never discussed how we were going to do it. It was just radio instincts kicking in. Had to make the best of a bad situation.
It hit Todd Blackadder fair in the face, didn't it? Because he kind of lost his coaching job after that. If he had won that, he'd probably still be coaching the Crusaders. Who knows?
That Tony Johnson said on the radio this morning the tickets would go on sale at 9 o'clock. And so I came down here at 8:30 and it's 11:30 and we're still here. And of course my name was mud with all these fans.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
The most memorable Super Rugby finals. Now, I was talking to Tony over the weekend and I said, I'm going to pick my 5 best ever, or what I thought were the 5 most exciting. He came back to me and he said, well, I'm just going to pick my 5 most memorable. So what we did is we exchanged lists, and bizarrely, we don't actually have the same finals. We had one which we decided, okay, because we've both chosen that, we'll pick another one, right?
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've got a list of 10 here, and they're in no particular order apart from chronological order, but we thought we'd give you our 10 most memorable finals and just briefly explain why we thought each one was deserving to be on this list. You can start because you picked the first one.
Okay, and it was the first final. It was back in 1996, the first year of Super Rugby. We weren't quite sure what it was going to be, whether it was going to be some kind of fantasy football or whatever, but by the end of the year we were sold on it. And it was a sellout crowd. The Blues hosted the final. They had a stroke of fortune. They had to win in South Africa to make sure they got up as high as second place, and that took some doing. But then the Sharks tipped up the Reds, who were top qualifiers, in the semi-final, and the Blues won against Northern Transvaal, and so that got the Blues the right to stage the final. Now, I was working on the breakfast show with Paul Holmes in those days doing the sports news, and I don't know why. I know these days it's a case of you get the story out and check the facts later. Back in those days, we used to do a thing called fact-checking before we put the stories out, but I didn't I didn't do it on this occasion. I just instinctively said, because the tickets for the next week's game always used to go on sale at 9 o'clock in the morning at Eden Park. There were no internet sales in those days. You had to go and get them. Yep. And I don't know why, but I just... As a line, maybe just to start building up excitement, I said tickets will go on sale at 9 o'clock this morning.
No, there we go.
But because it was Sansa, it was a new thing, they couldn't sell tickets until midday. But I'd gone and say they were on 9. And by 10:30, there were thousands of people queuing down Sandringham Road.
Yeah, of course they would have been, yeah.
And of course the news media is going, wow, this is amazing. This is like the 1950s and the Springboks tour all over again. People, queuing to get tickets. Bill Ralston took a camera crew down there for TV3 to talk to people about this queuing up for tickets, and got to this guy and he goes, that Tony Johnson said on the radio this morning the tickets would go on sale at 9 o'clock. And so I came down here at 8:30 and it's 11:30 and we're still here. And of course my name was mud with all these fans, because the word had got around, there was going to be a rush for the tickets. But hey, I suppose it helped to build it up. And we got it. We had a final between the Blues and the Sharks. They were a great Blues team built on that Auckland team that had been so dominant. Jonah and Joe Ellie on the wing, Carlos Spencer, Michael Jones, Andrew Blowers, and the Brook brothers, the great front row. But it was just a wonderful occasion, and that's why I've got it in my 10 greatest memories. The
next 3 we'll go through quickly because they're all Crusaders wins. I picked 1998, the Crusaders winning their first title, because for a couple of reasons. It was against all the odds. And as you say, that was a blue side, 96, 97 that had won. It was also really significant because the Crusaders winning that year was a sign of things to come for the All Blacks. Because all of a sudden we lost Olo Brown and Sean Fitzpatrick. We lost Zinzan Brook. Michael Jones, we couldn't replace him at 6 for the All Blacks. Frank Bunce went as well. All of a sudden that nucleus of that Auckland side lost to the Crusaders, and then none of them were going to be All Blacks again, and the All Blacks ended up losing 5 tests in a row that year. It was a massive turning point for New Zealand rugby. I believe the Crusaders winning that.
And remember that the Crusaders had been bottom the first year, and they were right down near the bottom.
They were 1 and 3, I think, when Justin did his Achilles.
Yeah, and then halfway through that 98 season, they were struggling a little bit, but they just came home with a wet sail. Yeah. I think James Kerr and Normie Maxwell scored tries.
Yeah, Kerr scored a try and bobbling around.
But the thing I remember about that game, the speech by Todd Blackadder at the end of it, when he said, we're not just about Canterbury, we're about Buller and West Coast and Nelson Bays and Marlborough and Mid Canterbury and South Canterbury. These are the people that we represent. And I just thought that showed the quality of the man, and a dynasty was born.
99. Party at Tony Brown's place. Now, if you don't remember, they're back of the advertising. It was an insurance company, and it was all over buses, all over Auckland. It might have been all over the
Kelly
country.
Brown, yeah.
Party at Kelly Brown's place, and it was like this advertising campaign about mum and dad were going away, and somehow it got out that there's a party there. Well, it just happened to coincide with the 99 final. Highlanders hosting Crusaders. Both of those teams had to win in South Africa. It was party at Tony Brown's place.
Well, the Crusaders actually won in Brisbane because I did that.
Sorry,
game.
that's
That was
right. They won away from home.
Yeah, my first year at Sky. So they won on Saturday night, and there were a couple of drinks at the hotel afterwards, and you go to bed and expect to wake up in the morning and the Crusaders will be down in the foyer with their bags ready to head off to Cape Town because the Stormers were the second qualifiers. They were playing the Highlanders, but the Highlanders tipped them up. That's when Murray came out with his famous line about the quality of the grass, and that had the grass looks rooted. You know, so instead of going off to South Africa, they went to Dunedin, and it was all about the party at Tony Brown's. It was a Sunday afternoon game, and the thing I remember about the match itself, brilliant try scored by Afatu So'oalo.
So'oalo.
I think you mentioned that to Jeff Wilson, and you'll see the colour drain from his face. It was it was one of those moments where how can you stop that? But and of course the thing was that they won their first 3 titles all away from home.
Well, that was it. The next one is you picked the 2000 final, the thriller and the chiller in Canberra, where I think the amazing stat was something like the Crusaders had between 10 and 15% possession. That was it. They defended the whole game. They won without the ball. Ron Cribb scored a great try. Mertens kicked, and they won without the ball.
It was the clutch goal kicking of Mertz, I suppose, that made the difference on the scoreboard in the end, but it really was about defence. And I think that was the first time that a big game like that had been won on
sheer defence. Yeah.
I think there was one time in the game, and I can't remember the exact number, but we went through it on the reunion show on the Tuesday. We actually sped it up. I think the Brumbies had because they had that patterned, methodical style, Gregan, Larkham, Mortlock, it was just phase, recycle. And I'm pretty sure the Crusaders defended for something like 27 phases, and the Brumbies actually lost ground. They developed that gang tackling style where 2 guys, Reuben Thorne and Norm Maxwell would get up and the guy carrying the ball would be smashed back to where he came from. And it was all about that. And all I can remember the rest of the night was, it was a bit fuzzy. I think it was the next day the flight home was horrible. Got home and watched the Canberra Raiders playing in about 4 inches of snow because it was so freezing cold that night. It was awful.
06, I put down the fog final. Never before, never again, never since. And they dial it up against the Hurricanes, and they fog us out, and they win the final.
Allegedly, yes, we think they won.
So it has to go in purely because if you're talking about memorable finals,
and no one could have seen it coming. It was an unusual kind of fog that rolled in about 7 o'clock.
Yeah, game time.
And I was actually down to do sideline that night. I'm not quite sure why Smithy wasn't doing it, but I was on the sideline, and Mark Stafford said to me, why don't you go around the other side? Because once the ball got into the middle of the field, Nisbo and Murray upstairs couldn't see where it was. Right. So I kind of did a radio commentary
from the other side.
From the other side of the field. And I think we talked about it afterwards. We never discussed how we were going to do it. It was just radio instincts kicking in. Had to make the best of a bad situation. One thing, for the record, the decision to play that game had nothing to do with Sky. Okay. Because I was there when the conversation went on. Our executive producer, Andrew Fife, said, we'll do what you guys want to do. If you want to play it now, we'll televise it now. If you want to play it tomorrow, we'll televise it tomorrow. Right. They made the decision, the teams, the chief executives of New Zealand Rugby and the franchise, they made the decision to go ahead and play the game. And the outcry afterwards.
There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about this.
One guy rang Deeka's talkback because Deeka kept saying they should be playing it on Sunday afternoon. Well, by Sunday afternoon, the fog had come back, so it would have been just as bad. But this guy rang up and said, Sky could have downloaded, there's some software available that filters the fog out. And
right.
I thought, yeah. From the Flat Earth Society.
Did he have like one of them hats on, did he?
Yeah, but memorable probably for all the wrong reasons. And then, of course, there was the handbags at dawn incident the next day.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't go down as... It was memorable probably, as I say, for the the wrong reasons.
07 I put down, and this is the Bulls win in the last second against the Sharks.
Yep.
And it was 2019, and it was the first South African side to win, and then that team actually went on and won it again in 9 and 10.
Well, that was the beginning of a dynasty too.
It was. But that final, I just remember it was one of the finals that if you're a neutral watching a final, you wanted to go down to the last minute, and it did.
Brian Abana scoring in the end, chopping back against the flow. Sharks were the favourites to win it.
They were.
And the Bulls just ripped it away from them right at the end. Yeah, thrilling final. There have been, I think, 3 1-point finals. The one in Canberra was a 1-point final.
That was 2019 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was another one just more recently, and that one was the Waratahs beating the Crusaders. That was a 1-point final,
yeah.
and that one as well.
You've got the 2012 Chiefs win, the first of those two. Simply
because it was their first title. I was actually at the London Olympics, so I got up, went in early in the morning to watch. I just remember Sonny Bill crowd surfing. But there'd been such a magnificent
Dave Rennie in charge
investment in what Dave Rennie and Wayne Smith brought to that team. That's when the Chiefs really at last found out who they were, who they represented, and the massive amount of work went into that. Connecting to their people, to the land.
That's where the Chiefs' mana thing came from, wasn't it? It came from that time, yeah.
And that was huge. And the final, well, it was tough on the Sharks because they were bouncing back and forwards across the ocean, and I don't think they were ever going to win it, and it wasn't a close run thing at all. But to me, that was just at the start of a golden era for the Chiefs, and as I say, the crowd surfing of Sonny Bill Williams, kind of like the icing on the cake, the exclamation point on the whole thing. 2014,
New South Wales win. I still have a bit of a sour on about that because it wasn't a penalty in the end, and when the ref admits afterwards it's not a penalty, and the fallout, it hit Todd Blackadder fair in the face, didn't it? Because he kind of lost his coaching job after that. If he had won that, he'd probably still be coaching the Crusaders. Who knows? Because then they go on this amazing run into Razor. New South Wales, their only win. A hell of a game, and again it came down to something that happened in the last second.
Yeah, it was a high scoring game, and I agree with you. I had a look at it when I saw that was on your list, and look, Craig Joubert, to my way of thinking, is probably the best referee that Super Rugby's ever had. Now, I know that's a huge call because you've had guys like Johnny Kaplan, who is a very good referee. I think Angus Gardner's a very good referee. We've had good referees, but to me, I always loved Craig Joubert's style, that he did try and let the players win the game, and perhaps, his career, there were a couple of moments. One obviously came in the World Cup with the Scotland-Australia game, and this one as well. And when you look at it, McCaw makes the tackle, he gets back to his feet. Initially, I thought he signalled that he'd come in the side, and then he said, you weren't the tackle, or something like that. Yeah, that was a tough call, but hey, Foley still had to kick the goal. Yep. And he scored 10 points in the last 7 minutes of that game as they came back to win it. So if a team can come back and win it in those circumstances, fair play to them. But it was a contentious finish. But yeah, as you say, it was the Waratahs first, and at this point in time, their only win.
Two to go, 2015. I picked the Highlanders over the Hurricanes because the Hurricanes did come back and win the next year. But it's just that these were the two New Zealand teams that hadn't won at that stage. And the Hurricanes had a hell of a season. I think they'd only lost one game. And it comes down to that. And it was just everything about Otago and Highlanders rugby on that night. Elliot Dixon carrying 5 across the line. Did he get it down? Just the Scarfies winning. It was just, to me, it just epitomised everything about their franchise. They had to win it at some stage. They just happened to beat my lot at that time, but we bounced back the next year. But I just remember there was just something really cool about that final. And I think most neutrals probably wanted the Highlanders to win that game.
And having played in a final at home in front of their own fans and lost it, to go and do it in Wellington, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in Wellington.
Yeah, that was some achievement, yeah.
And you get the last one.
And as you say, at least the Hurricanes came back. And the beauty of that period was that I think we had 4 teams in around that time that won it for the first time. So we were having different winners at that point. No one team was dominating the landscape.
2023, you go back to the Crusaders winning in Hamilton, and this is the final that we face again this spring. That was 25-20, as we said at the start of the show. Very narrow win it was.
Well, again, as I mentioned before, they were so desperate to win, the Chiefs, and discipline became a factor. That was a really hard one for them to get over. I think they felt that they had a team that had earned the right to stage the final, that they were a very good team. But again, the Crusaders, just something in their DNA that enables them to win those matches. But yeah, the 3 yellow cards, that really was the story of that game, that you can't win a final against a team like that, doesn't matter where it's being played. And that's the big lesson that they'll take from it.
There you go. 96, 98, 99, 2000, 06, 7, 12, 14, 15, 23. 10 memorable finals. Go back, have a look at the highlights. Leave us a comment about whether you think you agree.
I'm sure people will have other ones.
Yeah, of course.
But these are just ones. And as I say, it's more like not the greatest, necessarily the greatest games,
but a really good
but
story,
the ones that have
attached to them.
stuck in the memory because, the story of the game.
This is the DSPN.